It was supposed to be just a relaxing day by the pool. That's what Emma told herself when she walked out into the warm California morning, the air smelling faintly of orange blossoms and sunscreen. The pool behind her sister's house sparkled like blue glass under the sun. Everything looked perfect, too perfect for how she actually felt inside. She carried a book she knew she wouldn't read and a bottle of lemonade she didn't really want. What she wanted was peace, the kind that came when you stopped thinking about what you'd lost. Emma had arrived in Santa Barbara a week ago, trying to leave behind the noise of New York's the subway crowds, the cold rain, and most of all, the life she'd built with Michael. They'd been together for 4 years, and when it ended, it felt like someone had quietly closed a door inside her chest. There hadn't been a fight or betrayal, just distance that turned into silence. Now, even her memories felt heavy. Her sister, Claire, had offered her the guest house and said, "Stay as long as you need." Emma had smiled and said she just needed a few quiet days. She laid her towel across the lounge chair, adjusting it with care, as if the right fold could make the day behave. She put on her sunglasses, leaned back, and tried to relax. The sound of the pool filter hummed softly. Cicadas buzzed in the distance, and a neighbor's wind chimes swayed lazily in the breeze. For a moment, she thought she might actually find that quiet. But quiet can be tricky. When the world goes still, your thoughts grow louder. Emma closed her eyes and tried not to think about Michael's voice, how it used to fill every Sunday morning. He had loved summer. He used to joke that she was too pale for California, that she belonged in bookstores and coffee shops, not under the sun. Now he was gone, and she was here, alone with the sound of water and too many unfinished memories. She almost didn't hear the gate open. The small creak startled her, and she lifted her sunglasses to see a man standing near the edge of the yard. He looked a little surprised to see her. "Hey," he said, raising a hand politely. "Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I'm Ryan Claire's neighbor. She said I could use the pool when she's not around. Didn't know anyone was here." Emma blinked, unsure whether to tell him to leave or to let him stay. But something in his tone, casual, kind, softened her. "Oh, it's fine. I'm Emma, her sister. You can swim. I was just reading." Ryan smiled, though his eyes carried a quiet tiredness, the kind that made him seem both calm and a little distant. "Thanks," he said simply, and walked toward the pool. He moved with a relaxed confidence, like someone who had learned to live in his own rhythm. Emma tried to return to her book, but curiosity kept breaking her focus. Ryan dove into the pool with one smooth motion. The sound of water echoed softly, and for the first time all day, the silence didn't feel so heavy. He swam a few laps, then rested by the edge, looking toward her. "You're visiting for the summer?" he asked. "Just a few weeks," she said. "Needed a break from the city." He nodded, brushing water from his hair. "New York, right? Claire mentioned it once. I used to work there years ago. Didn't last long. Too loud for me." Emma gave a small laugh. "You're not wrong. Something about his presence was easy. There was no forced charm, no awkward small talk. They spoke like people who'd both been carrying something heavy for too long and suddenly found a moment to rest." Ryan told her he worked remotely as a designer, that he'd moved here after a long engagement that didn't work out. He said it without bitterness, just as a fact, and Emma respected that. The afternoon sun shifted, casting golden ripples across the water. Emma loosened her shoulders and realized she'd stopped thinking about Michael. Instead, she was watching how sunlight moved across the pool. How Ryan laughed when he told stories about learning to surf and failing miserably. They talked until the lemonade grew warm. Emma didn't notice the time passing until shadows began to stretch across the yard. She stood to leave, tucking her towel under her arm. "I should head in. Claire's making dinner." Ryan nodded, pulling himself out of the water. "It was nice meeting you, Emma. Maybe I'll see you around." "Maybe," she said with a small smile. And for the first time in months, she meant it. As she walked back toward the house, the air felt lighter. There was no rush of excitement, no sudden spark, just a quiet warmth. A reminder that maybe not everything new had to be painful. She didn't look back, but she knew Ryan was still there, drying off by the pool. probably thinking about how strange life could be. That night, as she sat by her window, she could still hear the faint sound of water lapping against the pool tiles. It felt different now, less like silence, more like a heartbeat. She didn't tell Claire about Ryan, not because it was a secret, but because she didn't want to label it yet. It was just a conversation, a few shared moments under the sun. But it had done something small and important. It reminded her that healing didn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it began with something simple, a question from a stranger. A gentle laugh, a quiet afternoon where the world didn't demand anything from her. The next morning, Emma found herself standing by the window again, coffee in hand, staring at the pool. She told herself it was just curiosity, wondering if he might show up again. She reminded herself she wasn't looking for anything. She was just resting, just healing, just breathing. But deep down, she knew that the smallest shift had already begun. It was supposed to be just a relaxing day by the pool, an afternoon to forget. But life has a way of surprising people when they stop expecting anything at all. And as the California sun climbed higher, Emma realized something she hadn't felt in a long time. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she was ready to start feeling again. She smiled to herself, a soft, quiet smile that no one saw. The world was still uncertain, her heart still tender. But something inside her whispered that this summer might be the one that changes everything. And somewhere beyond the fence, she thought she heard the faint sound of the gate again. The story was only beginning. The next few days passed quietly. But Emma found herself glancing toward the pool more often than she meant to. She told herself it wasn't about Ryan, it was just the calm she liked. The sunlight on the water, the stillness, the way time seemed slower there. But every time she heard the creak of the gate, her heart beat a little faster. On Wednesday afternoon, she was already by the pool when he appeared. Towel slung over his shoulder, a light grin on his face. "We really need to stop running into each other like this," he said, setting his towel down. Emma smiled. "You're the one invading my quiet time." He raised a brow. "You quiet? You've been reading the same page for 10 minutes. She laughed, surprised by her own ease. There was something about Ryan that felt safe, not too familiar, not too distant, just easy. He slipped into the pool with one smooth motion, and when he surfaced, the sunlight caught the small lines near his eye, signs of someone who had lived. Not just existed, they started talking without planning to. It began with small things: the weather, favorite coffee shops, the absurd price of gas. But then the conversation deepened. Emma told him about the city, how she used to love its energy until it became exhausting. Ryan talked about how he'd moved to California after his engagement ended. "We were supposed to get married," he said simply, floating on his back, eyes on the sky. "But we kept growing in different directions. It's strange how love can fade without either person doing anything wrong." Emma listened quietly. She understood that kind of loss, the one that didn't come from anger, but from silence. "I get that," she said. "Sometimes, too, people just stop being the right fit." He turned to look at her, his expression soft. "Yeah, but it still leaves you wondering what to do with all the love that's left." The words lingered in the air. Emma didn't know how to answer. She just nodded, staring at the water rippling between them. After that, their talks became a routine. Ryan would stop by in the afternoons, bringing iced tea or a small snack from the cafe down the street. Sometimes they swam, sometimes they just sat near the edge of the pool, feet in the water, letting the sunlight do the talking. There was no rush between them, no tension, just a quiet understanding that both were still healing. One afternoon, Emma brought her sketchbook. She hadn't drawn since before her breakup. Ryan noticed it immediately. "You draw." "Used to," she said, flipping the pages shyly. The sketches were mostly landscapes, a few portraits, and one unfinished drawing of New York at night. He pointed to it. "You miss it?" "Sometimes," she said. "But I think I miss who I was there more than the city itself." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "I know that feeling. Sometimes I miss the version of me who believed everything would last." Their eyes met for a moment. And something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared heartbreak, not as tragedy, but as truth. They both knew what it was like to lose something quietly. The breeze picked up and a few leaves drifted into the pool. Ryan leaned over to scoop them out, and Emma couldn't help but notice the gentleness in his movements. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just present. It had been a long time since she'd felt that from anyone. "Can I tell you something?" he asked after a while, voice low. "Sure." "When I first moved here," he said, "I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone. It seemed easier that way. But lately," he paused, eyes on the water. "Lately, it doesn't feel so impossible to let people in again." Emma's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she looked away. "That's a good thing, isn't it?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think it is." For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them was still, the air warm, the sound of water soft and steady. And in that quiet, Emma realized she wasn't thinking about Michael anymore. She wasn't comparing or remembering or wishing things had gone differently. She was just there in that small backyard beside someone who understood silence. As the day grew older, golden lights spilled across the water. Ryan leaned back, eyes half closed. You ever notice how pools always look different at sunset? Like they're holding the light instead of reflecting it. Emma smiled. "That's a poetic way to put it." He shrugged. "Maybe I'm just seeing things differently these days." She looked at him for a long moment. Maybe she was too. When the sky began to turn orange and pink, Emma realized how late it had become. "I should probably head inside," she said, standing and wrapping her towel around her shoulders. Ryan stood too, running a hand through his wet hair. "Yeah, I should go. Got some work to finish tonight." She nodded. "See you tomorrow?" He hesitated, then smiled. "If you'll be here?" Emma laughed lightly. "I might be." As she walked toward the house, she felt that same unfamiliar warmth in her chest, gentle, not overwhelming. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something softer. Something that made her believe in possibilities again. That night, as she sat on her bed scrolling through old photos, she stopped on one of her and Michael at a summer fair. She studied her own smile, the one that used to come so easily. It didn't hurt the way it used to. She closed her phone, turned off the light, and whispered to herself, maybe this is what starting over feels like. The next morning, she woke earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the air cool. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window overlooking the pool. The surface was still reflecting the pale sky, and for a second, she could almost see yesterday's laughter floating there. At noon, she found herself by the pool again, same spot, same towel. She told herself she was there for the sun, for the quiet, for her own thoughts. But when she heard the familiar sound of the gate, she couldn't stop the smile that formed before she even looked up. Ryan walked in with 2 lemonades this time. "Thought you might be here," he said. Emma tried to sound casual. "Guess we're making this a routine." He grinned. Could be worse routines. They sat side by side, their feet in the water, talking about small things, favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams that had changed. Every now and then, one of them would say something honest, something real, and the other would simply listen. And that was enough. By sunset, Emma realized she hadn't felt that sense of emptiness all day. There was still healing left to do, but for now, she had this warm light, soft laughter, and the quiet rhythm of connection. As the evening breeze brushed her hair, she turned to Ryan and said, "You know what's funny? It really was supposed to be just a relaxing day by the pool." He looked at her, eyes kind. "Maybe it still is, just not the kind you expected." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't want the day to end by the 3rd week of summer. Emma's days had fallen into a quiet rhythm. Mornings started with coffee on the porch, afternoons by the pool, and often Ryan's familiar voice drifting through the yard. What began as coincidence had become routine, though neither of them said it out loud. It felt natural, easy. And yet, beneath that ease, something unspoken had started to grow. The air was warm that Thursday, the kind of still heat that made the world slow down. Emma was sketching again, tracing light lines of the poolside garden, when Ryan arrived holding 2 iced coffees. "You're becoming predictable," she teased. "Consistency is underrated," he replied, setting the drinks down beside her. She smiled and returned to her drawing. He leaned over her shoulder, watching quietly. "You're good," he said. "Not really," she answered, blushing. "You are. You notice small things, shadows, lines most people ignore." There was something in the way he said it that made her pause. Not the compliment itself, but the care behind it. Ryan wasn't the kind of man who said things to fill silence. When he spoke, it felt like every word mattered. They spent the afternoon talking about everything and nothing music. Travel. What they'd do differently if they could start over. The conversation flowed like water, light and effortless. But as the sun began to fade, the sky shifted. Clouds gathered slowly, turning the air heavy. "Looks like rain," Ryan said, glancing upward. Emma squinted at the sky. "In California. That would be a miracle." A few drops landed on her arm. She laughed, startled, and before they could gather their things, the drizzle turned into real rain. The sound filled the backyard, soft but steady. They dashed under the covered porch, breathless and laughing. Ryan shook the water from his hair and looked at her with that boyish grin she had come to like too much. "Guess the pool's off limits for now." "Maybe it's a sign," she said, catching her breath. "The universe saying we should sit still for once." They sat on the porch steps, side by side, watching the rain blur the world into silver streaks. The pool rippled, reflecting flashes of light. For a long time, they didn't talk. They just listened. It was the kind of silence that felt full, not empty. After a while, Ryan spoke. "You ever feel like you're caught between who you used to be and who you're supposed to become?" Emma turned to him. The question felt too real, too close to what she'd been feeling for months. "Every single day," she said quietly. He nodded, staring out at the rain. "I used to think I had everything figured out, career, relationship, plans. Then life changed, and I had to start over. But I didn't know how. I tried pretending I was fine. It didn't work." She looked at him, really looked at him. There was a raw honesty in his eyes that made her chest ache. "So, what did you do?" "I stopped trying to fix everything," he said. "I just started living again, even when it didn't make sense." Emma let his words sink in. They felt like something she needed to hear. For months, she had been waiting to feel like herself again, to rebuild the version of her that existed before heartbreak. Maybe she didn't need to go back at all. Maybe she just needed to move forward, one quiet moment at a time. The rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, low and gentle. Ryan reached for the coffee cups beside him, handing her the one that had gone cold. "Cold coffee and rain," he said with a half smile. "That's a good combination." She laughed softly. "You have low standards." "Maybe that's the secret," he said. "Stop expecting everything to be perfect." Emma leaned back against the porch railing, her towel wrapped loosely around her shoulders. She hadn't realized how close they were sitting until now. His presence was warm, calm, familiar in a way that didn't scare her. A long pause stretched between them. Rain fell harder, echoing on the wooden deck. Ryan's voice broke the quiet again, softer this time. "Emma, can I ask something?" She looked at him, unsure. "Sure. Do you ever think about trying again?" "Not with my mean in general. With people. With love." The question hit her like a ripple spreading across still water. She didn't answer right away. "I think about it," she said finally. "But I'm scared. Not of being alone, just of feeling everything again." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." They sat in silence again, watching raindrops dance across the surface of the pool. The air smelled of wet grass and jasmine. For a moment, the world felt suspended just, the two of them, surrounded by sound and stillness. Ryan reached over not to touch her hand, but to steady her coffee cup as it wobbled slightly in her grasp. His fingers brushed hers, light and brief, but the small gesture sent a warmth through her that she didn't expect. He didn't pull away right away, and she didn't move either. It wasn't romantic in a dramatic way, it was gentle, careful, and real. The storm began to ease. The rain softened into mist, and the clouds thinned, revealing a pale glow of twilight. Ryan stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the pool now shimmering under faint moonlight. "You know," he said quietly, "I think rain always feels different when you're not trying to escape it." Emma joined him, standing close enough to feel the damp air on her skin. "You make everything sound like a metaphor," he chuckled. "Maybe I just like seeing meaning in small things." She smiled, watching the reflection of the moon ripple in the water. "I think I do too." The evening air carried a peaceful stillness, the kind that felt like a promise of change. Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. When the rain stopped completely, Ryan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You should draw this," he said. "The rain, the pool, the light. It's kind of perfect." Emma nodded. "Maybe I will." As he started to leave, she called after him, "Ryan." He stopped and looked back. "Thanks," she said softly. "For what?" "For sitting through the rain." He smiled. That same quiet smile she was starting to know well. Any time. After he left, Emma stayed outside, listening to the faint drip of water from the roof. The air was cool, fresh, filled with the scent of rain and something new she couldn't name. She sat down again, sketchbook in hand, and began to draw the outline of the porch. The reflection of the moon on the wet tiles. The empty chair beside her. For the first time since arriving in California, she didn't feel lost. The ache in her chest wasn't gone, but it had changed. It felt softer, like something healing instead of something broken. She looked toward the gate, where Ryan had disappeared minutes ago, and smiled faintly to herself. The night was quiet, but not empty anymore. It had started as another day by the pool, and ended as something else, something slower, deeper. Unexpected dot, and as the last drop of rain hit the surface of the water, Emma realized that maybe love didn't always arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it came the next morning. The world felt washed clean. The rain had gone, leaving the air soft and clear, the sky a pale blue that made everything shimmer. Emma woke earlier than usual. The first thing she saw was the sunlight reflecting off the pool, small waves catching the light like glass. She stood by the window, holding her coffee, and let the quiet settle around her. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Last night kept replaying in her mind the sound of the rain, the warmth of Ryan's voice, that small, unspoken moment between them on the porch. Nothing dramatic had happened, but something had changed. It felt like she'd crossed a line inside herself, one she hadn't even known was there. She went outside barefoot, her hair still messy from sleep. The deck was damp, cool against her feet. The scent of rain lingered in the air. She sat at the edge of the pool, dipping her toes into the water, and smiled faintly. It was strange how one quiet evening could shift everything she thought she understood about healing. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was Michael's name on the screen. For a long moment, she just stared at it. She hadn't heard from him in months. The message was short. "Hope you're doing okay." Emma's heart didn't race the way it used to. She didn't feel the sting she once did. Instead, she felt calm, steady. She typed a reply, then stopped. What could she say? That she was fine now. That she was learning to breathe again. That the person she used to be had finally stopped waiting for something to return. None of that needed to be said. She deleted the message and put the phone face down beside her. "Letting go," she whispered to herself, as if saying the words out loud might make them real. A soft sound of the gate opening broke her thoughts. Ryan stepped into the yard carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You're up early," he said, smiling. "So are you." "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "Figured I'd bring you a peace offering for stealing your quiet mornings." She laughed and took the cup from him. "I'll forgive you this time." They sat side by side on the lounge chairs, the air still cool from the night. It was one of those calm mornings when words weren't needed, when silence said enough. The only sounds were the birds and the slow movement of water against the tiles. After a while, Ryan spoke softly. "You know, last night felt different." Emma looked at him. "Different how?" He took a sip of coffee, eyes fixed on the pool. "Like something shifted. Not just with the weather." She nodded slowly. Yeah, I felt it too. He glanced at her, half smiling. You don't have to explain it. I just wanted you to know. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. There was comfort in knowing he understood things without her needing to put them into words. That had been rare in her life, someone who didn't try to fix her pain, who just stayed beside her through it. They talked about small things after that, the plans for the day, Claire's weekend barbecue, the little things that fill mornings when people are learning to live again. The sun climbed higher, warm light spreading across their faces. Ryan leaned back and sighed. Funny how quickly things can change. A few weeks ago, I was sure I'd never let anyone close again. Emma smiled softly. Me too. He looked at her, his voice gentle. And now? She hesitated, then said, now I'm not so sure. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's just about being open again. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's the hardest part, isn't it? Letting the world touch you again. Emma stared at the pool, her reflection rippling across the water. Yeah, she said. But maybe it's worth it. A quiet breeze moved through the yard, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. Time seemed to slow down, stretching into something delicate and unhurried. For the first time in months, Emma wasn't waiting for something to happen. She was simply there, fully present, and it felt enough. Ryan stood and walked toward the edge of the pool, testing the water with his hand. It's warm already, he said, glancing back at her. You coming in? Emma shook her head. Not today. He smiled. Suit yourself. He dove in smoothly, water splashing in soft waves. Watching him, she felt a strange blend of peace and longing. Peace for what was, longing for what could be. Not in a rushed way, not desperate, just hopeful. When he surfaced, he called out, You sure? The water's perfect. Emma laughed and tossed one of the pool floats at him. I'll watch. He paddled toward her and leaned on the pool's edge, water dripping from his hair. You always watching from the sidelines. She grinned. Only until I'm ready. He studied her face, then said quietly, You look ready. Something in his tone made her heart skip. Not from romance exactly, but from truth. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a long sip of coffee and looked at the sunlight dancing on the water. Maybe I am, she said finally. The day went on easily, hours slipping by like soft music. They made lunch together, simple sandwiches, shared laughter, small stories about their pasts. Emma told him about her favorite childhood summer in Maine, about how she used to draw the sea and dream of living by it. Ryan told her about his road trip after college, driving up the coast with no map and no plan. Their stories overlapped in the way all people's stories do, through moments of longing, mistakes, and the quiet search for belonging. Later that afternoon, Claire came home and found them sitting under the umbrella, sketchbook and coffee cups between them. She smiled knowingly but said nothing. When she went inside, Ryan turned to Emma and said, I should probably go. Work calls. She nodded but didn't want him to leave just yet. Thanks for the coffee, she said softly. Anytime, he replied. He hesitated for a moment, then added, I don't think I've met anyone who makes silence feel comfortable. Emma's lips curved into a small smile. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time, he chuckled. Then I'll take that as a win. When he left, Emma stayed outside, sketchbook on her lap. She drew again the pool, the light, the empty chair where he'd been. Each line felt easy now, unforced. The world had changed, not in a loud way, but in the way soft moments often do, quietly, completely. The sun began to set, painting the sky in gentle colors. Emma looked at her phone once more at the message she hadn't sent. She deleted it, finally ready to let it go. She didn't need closure from the past anymore. She had found something better, peace in the present. The air cooled as evening came. She sat by the pool, feet in the water, and whispered, Thank you. Though she wasn't sure if it was meant for Ryan, for life, or for herself. Maybe all three. It was supposed to be just a relaxing day by the pool. Something simple, a way to pass the time. But it had become so much more, a quiet turning point. a reminder that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in soft moments, in unexpected laughter, in new faces that feel safe. As the stars began to appear, Emma leaned back, watching their reflection in the still water. For the first time in a long while, her heart didn't feel heavy. It felt open, and in that calm under the California night sky, she realized something beautiful sometimes. The best beginnings come disguised as ordinary days, quietly, like rain falling on a warm evening, asking nothing but to be noticed.